My name is Nathan Moore. I will be 46 years old this year. I work as a sales representative for a Chinese electronics company's American office. I enjoy my profession and find it very fulfilling to put my Chinese skills to use, which I have had since I was a student. I was deployed to the Chinese headquarters when I was young, for around 3 years. And after that, I returned multiple times for training and business travels. I had little time for romance because of my hectic life and I never met anyone, so I remained unmarried even after I turned 45. But last year, a fateful encounter came my way. On my way home from seeing a client, I was walking down the main street in front of the station when a big man in front of me collapsed on the spot. He was clutching his stomach and moaning in pain. I hurriedly crouched down beside him and called out to him, "Are you all right?"
But when I looked at his face, he seemed to be a foreigner, and he spoke to me in Chinese.
I have chest pain. Can you please call an ambulance?
I got you, right away.
I answered in Chinese and called 911 on my cell phone. Then a woman came up to us while I was on the phone.
What happened?
She was a lady of about 60 years old, looking very elegant.
This person says he has chest pains.
When I told her that, she spoke to the fallen foreigner in Chinese.
I am a nurse. Please explain to me where and how it hurts.
She then rolled up her own jacket and put it under the patient's head, asked about his condition, and took his pulse. When the ambulance arrived, she left with the patient explaining his condition to the paramedics. I thought it was cool to see her acting so efficiently.
I met her again when my father, who lived alone, was hospitalized for colon polyp surgery.
She was the nurse in charge in his room.
Oh, you are the nurse from the other day.
Oh my, thank you for your help back then.
She remembered me too.
I appreciate your help that day. You've been a great help. Was he all right?
Yes, thanks to you, who called an ambulance right away. With that, she smiled. You speak Chinese very well.
Not really. I learned it by myself.
Did you study Chinese by yourself?
That's right. I've always enjoyed watching movies and foreign TV shows, and I'm fascinated by Chinese culture. So I picked up Chinese by watching Chinese language TV shows and buying and reading books in Chinese.
I see, but you seem to speak Chinese too.
Well, I work for the American branch of a Chinese company, so I speak some Chinese too. So you have been to China before?
Yes, I have.
She has been to China on vacation too. After that, we started talking whenever we saw each other.
Her name was Elena, and she was almost 60 years old.
She was bright, had a lovely smile, and was a lot of fun to chat with, which piqued my interest. Now that I think about it, it was completely love at first sight. She was so attractive to me that I didn't care about the age difference. Through our conversation, I learned that she was divorced and now single. Elena had a daughter, but she was already married and out of the house. That's why I thought I could invite her out. So the day my dad got out of the hospital, I asked for her contact information.
She said yes, and we exchanged contact information. And after I got home, I immediately asked her out for dinner.
After that, we had dinner and went to the movies together several times. The more I got to know her, the more I was attracted to her. She was kind, considerate, cheerful, and always had a positive attitude. Even when I was tired from work or had problems, talking with her soothed me and cheered me up. About 6 months after we started dating, I proposed to her. Elena, will you marry me?
When I showed her the ring I had prepared and told her so, she had tears in her big eyes and said, "Are you sure you want to be with an old lady like me?"
I don't care about the age difference. I love you, Elena. I can't think of being with any other woman. Elena, I want to live the rest of my life with you.
When I said this and shook her hand, she began to shed large tears. Thank you. I want to live my life with you too, Nathan. Thank you. I want to live my life with you too, Nathan.
And so the proposal succeeded. We decided not to have a wedding ceremony at her request, though. She turned 60 and decided to retire from her nursing job. I took a 10-day vacation, and we spent our honeymoon in Beijing and Shanghai. We were celebrating Elena's 60th birthday and retirement, so we went all out. We stayed at a luxury hotel and ate at a 3-star restaurant. I was single until I was 45 years old and had no hobbies of my own, so I had saved up a lot of money. That is why we were able to take advantage of this opportunity to go on a luxurious trip. Elena was so happy. Seeing her excited like a little girl, I knew I made the right choice to go there. Then one morning, about 6 months after returning from the trip, we started our new life. I went to work as usual and was summoned by my boss.
The CEO of an important business partner of the Chinese headquarters is coming to the States on a trip with his wife. We are going to hold a dinner party to entertain them, and I'd like you to attend it with your wife.
My boss Nolan told me this and set a date and time for the event. I'll let you know the place when it's decided.
I understand, as I was making a note in my notebook. Zaza! He laughed.
I can't believe you are married now. I thought you'd never get married, but I'm glad there was someone unique who would pick you. He stared at me with contemptuous eyes.
Nolan was 2 years my senior, but he was happy to have a lovely wife 1 year younger than him, and he always made fun of me at every opportunity.
You must be lonely for being single. No woman would ever marry a man like you. He would say such things to look down on me, but I never expected him to say that after I married Elena. I was annoyed, but I kept my mouth shut. I was afraid Nolan would say something bad about her if he saw her, but it was an order, so I had no alternative. I had no choice but to take her there. The day of the dinner, I took Elena to the designated restaurant. The venue was a high-class steakhouse. I gave the staff the name of Nolan, the person who made the reservation, and we were sent to a private room where I met Nolan and his wife. Nolan was always quite proud of his wife, and she was a lovely, slim woman with a model body. I'm sorry to keep you waiting. I shook Nolan's hand, but he stared at my wife standing behind me and said,
Nathan, why did you bring your mother? You promised to bring your wife, didn't you?
Hearing those words, blood rushed to my head. Nolan had a nasty smile on the corner of his mouth. He most likely knew what he was saying and said it on purpose. He loved to harass me.
She's not my mother. Let me introduce her to you. This is my wife, Elena. Elena, this is my boss, Director Nolan.
Oh, excuse me. So you are his wife? Since you're so old, I thought you were his mother.
Nolan was acting more rude. When I looked over, Elena was laughing wryly without saying anything. She was pushing herself to laugh, but her sentiments must have been hurt. I knew I could never forgive Nolan for hurting my wife. If he ever said something like that to her again, I resolved to respond to him this time. A short time later, Mr. Richard, a client of the head office, showed up with a young employee who served as a guide.
Nice to meet you. I'm Richard. Excuse me, but my wife Emma is in the restroom right now. I'll present her to you all in a moment.
Mr. Richard spoke in Chinese. Nolan, his wife, me, and Elena introduced ourselves in Chinese. Nolan's wife was not fluent in Chinese, and she hardly talked except to say her name. When Richard asked her a question, no one answered for her. In contrast, Elena was fluent in Chinese and was happily conversing with Richard in Chinese. Seeing this, Nolan and his wife looked miffed.
Anyway, Nathan, how could you marry a woman so old?
Suddenly, Nolan started speaking in English.
No matter how well she speaks Chinese, what in the world is so good about her if she looks so old? Young women are always better. Or did you like mature women? How old is she anyway?
Nolan said all kinds of things. It's true that Elena was 60 years old, and she didn't particularly look young for her age. But she had an ageless beauty, and I fell in love with her since she had a fantastic quality as well. However, Nolan mocked in such a cliched way. I felt as if my love for my wife had been completely denied. However, Nolan mocked in such a cliched way. I felt as if my love for my wife had been completely denied.
Nolan, I think you're acting rude for saying that.
I said, shaking my fist.
Excuse me? I'm your boss. Are you trying to talk back to me?
Nolan smirked at me. Richard, who did not understand English, was confused.
It doesn't matter if you're my boss or not. There are things you shouldn't say.
Honey, I don't care what he says about me. Since I married you, I've been preparing myself for something like this.
Elena then pulled my cuff. That's when it happened. The door to the private room opened and a foreign woman, guided by an employee, came in.
Emma, this way, come in. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to introduce her to you. This is my wife, Emma.
With that, Richard stood up. Emma was a tall woman about 60 years old. She went to take a seat next to Richard, stared at Nolan, and started speaking in fluent English.
I was listening to what you just said. It made me feel so uncomfortable. Apologize to them right now, Emma said in a harsh tone, and Nolan froze with his mouth open. I am also 9 years older than Richard, but what is wrong with a wife being older than her husband? I feel very offended when people say that younger women are better. Emma was furious.
Nolan's face turned pale. Then he hurriedly apologized to Emma. I'm sorry, ma'am.
Apologize to them, not to me, Emma said with an angry look on her face. Then Nolan turned to me and Elena.
Nathan, Alina, I am sorry for my rude words. Please forgive me.
Emma conveyed what had recently occurred in Chinese to Richard, who could not understand the situation. Richard's face turned red to the ears with anger.
You are such a rude man. I don't want to have dinner with a man who would casually say such a thing. We are leaving. It was Emma who quieted down Richard, who was furious and yelling in Chinese.
Well, well, well. He has already apologized, so let's forgive him.
No, I won't. I can't forgive him. You two leave now. And don't make such remarks again in the future. Richard's rage did not subside, and with a pale face, Nolan shuffled off with his wife.
So once again we introduced ourselves to Emma.
It's a pleasure to meet you. I am Elena, Nathan's wife. It was a pleasure to meet you. I am Elena, Nathan's wife.
Emma's eyes widened as she heard Elena say so.
Elena? Are you Elena Moore? Yes, that's right. Oh my god. I'm Emma Anderson, your email friend.
Emma got excited and started speaking in Chinese.
No way. Are you that Emma?
Elena couldn't hide her surprise either. The two of them took each other's hands and rejoiced at this chance encounter. According to their story, they met on an online forum and had been exchanging emails for more than 20 years. Elena taught Emma English, and Emma taught Elena Chinese. I noticed that's why Emma knew how to speak in English. They never had a video call before, because Elena was too shy to talk to Emma. So they didn't know each other's faces. But still, what a coincidence. I never thought Elena would meet her overseas email friend of 20 years here. After that, we had a great dinner, with Emma and Elena's conversation being the primary topic of discussion. The food was delicious and well received by Richard and Emma.
Well, I had a nice evening. I don't agree with what Nolan said, but I'm glad Emma and Elena happened to cross paths by coincidence.
Richard had heard about Emma's longtime email friend for a long time.
I am also very happy to have had the opportunity to enjoy some authentic American cuisine, which I have been wanting to try for a long time. I'll let the person in charge at the Chinese headquarters know about it.
Richard said that as he and Emma were leaving after the meal, it seemed the reception was a success. After we got home that day, Elena said to me,
Nathan, thank you for defending me from your boss earlier. I said I was alright at the moment, but I'm sure I would have been startled if you hadn't done anything. I was relieved and happy that you were able to talk back to your boss. In that situation, it was natural to refute. It is unacceptable for anyone to speak negatively about you, even if he is my boss.
But you said you were prepared for this when you married me. I didn't know you were thinking that. It kind of surprised me.
Because we're 14 years apart. I don't look young, and it's obvious to everyone around us that there's an age difference between us, right? I was prepared to have a lot of things said about that. I'm delighted your parents weren't against our marriage, but...
I see. You had to be prepared for that to marry me. I appreciate that you went that far to marry me, Elena.
It was nothing. It's nothing compared to the happiness of being with you.
Elena said that and smiled at me. Seeing her smile made me love her even more. A few days after Richard returned to China, I received a call from the headquarters informing me that a significant commercial deal had been struck with Richard's company. It was said that Richard sent me his regards. Also, it appears that Richard had informed the main office about Nolan's heinous remarks. As punishment, he was demoted to an ordinary employee. I was selected as a department head instead, and the positions of Nolan and I were reversed. After that day, Nolan stopped talking down to me. He became completely quiet, and it was a great relief to see him so humble toward me. Elena and Emma have maintained contact through email and phone since then. I learned that Elena is arranging a trip to Shanghai where Emma lives. Seeing Elena speaking happily, I vowed to myself. I vowed that I would keep making her happy for the rest of my life.
My real parents died in a car accident 30 years ago. I was 1.5 years old at the time, in a car seat, and miraculously survived.
Because both of my parents were raised in orphanages and had no relatives, I was adopted by a couple who were unable to have their own children. They were gentle and loving and took care of me as if I were their own child. They raised me in a family with a steady income, and I was able to attend college as a result.
From now on, I will earn money and do my best so that you two can spend their retirement happily.
After landing a job at an industry-leading venture firm, I thought it was time to repay my parents. I started to work with a renewed spirit. I moved out of my parents' house when I entered college and lived alone. My parents were always concerned about me, so in addition to good morning and good night, I texted them after I left and got home, which was awkward to say to my friends. But I was living a fulfilling life. Work was rewarding and going well, and I was enjoying working on the same projects as the company's young and dynamic CEO. Even my parents were initially anxious about my career in a field they had never heard of, observing my success in comparison to my friends of the same generation.
You are amazing. I'm so proud of you.
My parents seemed to finally believe in what I was doing. A few years passed, and when I turned 30, my dad, who had spent his entire life on the cutting edge, suffered a stroke and was sent to the hospital where he died without ever regaining consciousness. I regretted that I had not been able to show him any filial piety, and that I had not even had the chance to say a few last words to him. My dad always listened to me with a smile, and even when my mom was sometimes worried about me, he would say,
"It's typical of a boy. Let him do it."
My dad was always on my side supporting me, and I was grateful to him no matter what. My dad's death was more of a shock to my mom, who had been with him for many years. She was so out of it at her husband's funeral that she would have fainted without me by her side, unable to absorb the reality of the situation.
Mom, I'm always by your side.
She nodded weakly. Then her look returned to sorrowful and sad. I was worried about leaving her at home alone, but I had a lot of work to do and couldn't return.
Mom, why don't you come over to my house for a while? Wouldn't you be lonely by yourself?
I suggested her, but
I don't want to leave my house with so many memories of your father. Thank you for worrying about me. I'll be okay.
as a result, she stayed at home, and I spent my days focusing on the tasks at hand, despite my concerns for her. Mom would have no issue making ends meet with the inheritance that my dad left her. I thought that time would take care of my mom's depression, though not completely. However, I was mistaken, and my mom's mind had been so affected by my dad's death that she was unable to make rational decisions. I received a call from her one day, but I was in the middle of a business meeting and was unable to answer the phone right away. So I called her back in the evening after work had settled down.
Hey Mom, I'm sorry for getting back to you late.
I spoke to her as usual, but she seemed to be acting strangely.
I wasn't sure if I should tell you about this, but I think I may have been scammed.
I was so surprised that I moved to a place where no one could hear our conversation, calmed down and listened to her. After hearing the details from my mom, I rushed to talk to my boss and immediately went straight from my office to my parents' house. I went to the police station with my mom and spoke with them, but the fraud was pretty clever. I was merely advised that the big sum of money my mom had transferred was extremely unlikely to be returned. It was difficult for me to look at my mom's face, which was so depressed and filled with sorrow, couldn't even look at her.
It's not your fault, Mom. Scammers are to be blamed for this.
I tried my best to comfort her, but ever since that one incident, she had been in a state of depression. One winter night, her home caught fire due to mismanagement of the stove, and my mom, who had been sleeping, passed away. Within a year, I had lost my parents and my home, and as an orphan, and since I had no other siblings or relatives. Even though I was past 30, I was overcome with despair and emptiness, believing that I was genuinely alone in the world. I had no motivation to do the work I loved so much, and the bad things kept happening. The company I worked for, which had seemed to be doing so well, went bankrupt. I thought my life was over, and all I could do was laugh. All of my dad's inheritance was lost because my mom was scammed, and part had to be used to rebuild a neighbor's house that had been damaged in a fire. With only a suitcase, I moved out of the flat with my meager severance pay and savings, and into a cheap, shared house in San Francisco. At my age, there was plenty of full-time employment available, and the CEO of the company I used to work for offered to refer me to his friend's company. I was so depressed by the loss that I didn't want to do anything, and I was halfway to the point where I didn't care what happened to my life. I was so engrossed in negative thinking that I thought my true parents and the parents who had nurtured me so well would have died as a result of my connection with them. I had no idea what the meaning of life was. My little savings vanished so quickly that I didn't even have enough money to cover the cost of the shared house. I had no choice but to live on the streets and get a day job just to make ends meet. As the youngest homeless person in the area, I was often offered jobs at construction sites. It was a job I'd never done before, but it wasn't too bad as long as I didn't care what other people thought of me. One of my colleagues was very kind to me. I got this at sales for 50 cents. Come on, eat it. And he would give me pizza.
Thank you very much.
I was more pleased by his kindness than by the price, and I made a small chat with him while I enjoyed the pizza. It made me happy that day, and after work, I had a shower at a support facility. After that, I took a nice stroll along the riverbed to my house after nightfall. Then I saw a boy of elementary school age crouching alone near the river. I was somewhat concerned, so I quickly approached him and called out to him.
Hey, are you all right? What are you doing here all alone?
When he noticed me, he appeared surprised for a while before becoming without emotion and staring into the distance.
It's going to be dark soon. If you don't go home soon, the people at home won't worry. How close is your home from here?
I squatted down, made eye contact with the boy, and slowly spoke to him. The boy glanced at me and said quietly,
I had a fight. I ran away from home and walked all the way here, but I got lost.
Apparently, the boy had a fight with his family and ran out of the house in a hurry, but he really got lost.
I see. Do you know where you live? If so, I can take you there.
The boy looked at me and said,
Mister, you are not a bad person, are you?
I found his cheeky way of saying it rather cute and burst out laughing.
Ha ha ha! What are you talking about? What a terrible thing to say. Well, if I look like this, I'm sure I look suspicious.
When I said that, the boy chuckled and looked at me.
You don't seem like a bad guy. Will you promise to take me home?
Sure, if you give me your address, I'll take you there.
The boy's name was Andrew, and Andrew gave me his address without hesitation. It was quite a distance from where we were.
You must have walked a long distance. I'm sure your legs are tired.
Don't worry. I'm used to it playing soccer.
The sun was about to set, so we hurried. We walked pleasantly with Andrew, talking about soccer to his house, which was about 30 minutes away.
This is it. This is where I live.
I stopped and gasped at the sound of Andrew's voice. It was neither an apartment nor a house, but an orphanage.
Are you trying to tell me that your home is...
Yeah, I'm sure you were surprised. My mom and dad died in an accident a year ago. I have no other relatives, so they told me to live here, and this is my home now.
I was dumbfounded with inexplicable thoughts as I saw Andrew chatting so cheerfully.
I see, so you don't have parents either. Actually, my parents died in an accident too.
I see, so you grew up in an orphanage too?
Andrew asked me that without any malice.
No, I was lucky enough to be adopted by a very sweet couple, for which I am very grateful. But they both died last year. My only regret is that I couldn't pay them back.
Andrew got excited when I mentioned my parents and began to ask questions.
What's it like to have a new mom and dad?
Well, I was only about 1.5 years old at the time, so I didn't really remember my real parents. So I considered those who raised me to be my true parents, and I took them for granted.
Andrew looked at me with a slightly relieved face.
I see. Then maybe I should meet them too. You know, I ran away because I was called to my teacher's room in the morning. I heard that there was a couple who wanted to adopt me. I still haven't forgotten my mom and dad, and I've decided that I will never forget them. That's why I'm afraid to meet them. I thought that if they were nice people and I fell in love with them, my real mom and dad would be sad.
I was a baby when my foster parents took me in. So I didn't have that kind of conflict between my real parents and my new parents. So I admired Andrew for being able to think about his biological parents like that.
You are a nice kid. So that's why you ran away suddenly. Why don't you tell your teacher about it? He must be a good person to you, right?
Andrew grinned and nodded.
Yeah, I like him a lot. If I tell him what we just talked about, I wonder if he will understand my feelings as well as you did.
I'm sure he will. Even I, who just met you, could understand how you feel. I'm sure your teacher, who sees you every day, will understand. I see. I got it. I'll apologize to him and tell him how I feel.
Andrew said with a brighter expression than the first time I met him.
Thank you, mister. You just hang in there, too.
With a smile on his face, Andrew passed through the gate and went back inside the facility. I kept smiling and waving until Andrew was out of sight. I was reflecting on his final words to me. Hang in there. I wished Andrew a bright future, but I knew I had to work hard like him too. For the sake of my parents who had sent me to college, I was determined not to remain homeless. The next day, I put on a suit and started looking for a job. In between day jobs, I searched everywhere for a job that would allow me to make use of my previous career. But I didn't have an address to put on my resume, and I kept getting rejected on paperwork. The friendly colleague at the building site, who occasionally brought me pizza, said, At the building site, the friendly colleague who occasionally brought me pizza said, You can stay with us until you get a job. We are a father-son family, and my son just got a job and moved out, so I've got a spare room. I can't let you live there forever. But if you're serious about finding a job, I'll help you out. Really? Thank you very much. I thanked him sincerely and decided to accept his generous offer. A month later, I was hired by a company with better conditions than I had hoped for. I stayed at my colleague's house until my first paycheck came in. What a pity. I'm going to miss you. Let's have a drink together sometime.
Of course, I'll buy you a drink then.
2 months later, I left my colleague's house who had become my drinking buddy. I started a new life in a small old apartment. It was because of my encounter with Andrew that I was able to come back. I had always wanted to thank him once my life became stable. I took the plunge and visited the facility where Andrew lived on my weekday off. I had not seen Andrew since that day, but his words and smile remained in my mind. I stood in front of the gate and rang their intercom.
Yes, can I help you?
Hello? Actually,
I told over the intercom who I was and my relationship with Andrew.
You must be the Elijah that Andrew was talking about.
Apparently, the person who answered the door was the head of the facility, whom Andrew said was his favorite teacher. He came out the gate and talked about Andrew.
A little while after that, Andrew was adopted. He is now living with a couple in a neighboring town.
Apparently, Andrew had an interview with the couple after that, and was now living happily as a member of their family.
Please wait a moment. I'll contact his new house right now. I'm sure Andrew would love to talk to you.
Being persuaded by his kind smile, I talked with Andrew on the phone for the first time in months.
Andrew, I'm so happy for you.
When I brought it up, Andrew reacted as cocky as ever.
I'm happy for you too, mister. You must have worked hard too.
He responded to me cheerfully. When I heard his voice, I got the happy sensation that Andrew had overcome his difficulties and was living happily with his new family. At the same time, I wondered how a little encounter with someone could enrich my life so much. I was also filled with optimism for my own future.